At number 10 is Nostradamus, arguably the most famous seer ever recorded. Of course, I couldn't leave him out of this list. Prior to his popularity for foreseeing the future, he was actually a physician during the plague and became widely popular as one of the only physicians at the time encouraging proper hygiene and removal of dead bodies from the streets. But of course, it's his life-altering prophecies that are the reason we know him today. Well, how did that even begin? In 1538, he made some kind of offhand remark which resulted in an inquisition with the church. Nostradamus chose to leave Provence and travel through Italy, and it's here that he claims to have developed his psychic abilities. According to legend, he happened upon a group of monks, identifying one as the future pope, and 40 years later, that prediction indeed came true. Deciding to follow his gift, by 1555, Nostradamus published Les Prophéties, a collection of 100 visions about the future, which he planned to be the first of 10 editions. Credited with predicting events such as the French Revolution, the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, both world wars, and even the death of Princess Diana, his famous prophecies have stretched far outside his lifetime and definitely can make anyone wonder if he really did see the future.
At number 9, we have $1.6 million curse. This is the part of the psychic business that keeps me away from it. I just think I'm too gullible. Well, a woman from Houston was told by a psychic, Youre Sick, that her whole family was cursed. Sherry told this woman from Houston that if she wanted to lift the curse, that she would need to give her a bunch of money so she could buy all sorts of things she needed to lift the curse. The Houston woman would go to visit Sherry and kept giving her more and more money to lift this so-called curse. Sherry claimed the curse came from a witch who cursed the Houston woman's mother before she died. So she kept coming back and kept giving her more money. In total, Sherry scammed this lady for $1.6 million. One of the worst parts about this is that the lady was getting the money from her inheritance that her dead dad left for her. So Sherry was stealing money from a grieving lady and taking it from a dead man at the same time. Eventually, police caught wind of the scam, and Sherry was arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison, and she was forced to pay back all the money she conned out of this poor lady from Houston.
Coming in at number 8 is Mickey Dani. Regarded as one of the most famous seers in the entertainment industry, Mickey swept the nation through television and radio, and while alive, was known as a psychic to the stars with many famous celebrity clients, including Elvis Presley. She is regarded to have predicted the attack on Pearl Harbor as well as the downfall of the Nixon administration, with many of her predictions covered by the National Enquirer frequently in the 1970s. Other predictions include the Miami snowfall of January 19, 1977, which she predicted 3 weeks prior to its occurrence, shocking the public, as the last time Flora had seen snow was allegedly in 1899. With the tabloid press elevating her fame, she began to advertise her ability to communicate with spirits who had since left our realm, and claims to have spoken with celebrities such as Mary Jo Kopechne and even Marilyn Monroe. While there are many claims of what and who she has seen or spoken with, not much hard evidence can be found to support the claims. Next up, at number 7 is the American astrologer Jean Dixon. One of the most well-known psychics of the 20th century, Dixon wrote 7 books, including an autobiography, and predicted many historical events. Though she claims to not have been that interested in political affairs, she repeatedly predicted major political events, including the demise of President John F. Kennedy, stating in an issue of Parade magazine that the election would be dominated by Labor and won by a Democrat, who would then be assassinated or die while in office. Further, in 1945, Dixon was introduced to Prime Minister Winston Churchill and is reported saying it is best not to have an early election, otherwise you'll be defeated. But temporary defeat does not matter. After a few years, the British power will be in your hands once again. A prediction we saw play out when Churchill lost the election of 1945, but 6 years later returned as Prime Minister. Next up at number 6, we have Irene Hughes. Originally from Tennessee, Hughes says she became aware of her abilities at the age of 4, when a fairy took her up into her attic. She says that she followed the fairy up, and there was a man standing there who she immediately recognized to be a spirit, and that was the moment she knew her calling. In 1945, after she married, she and her husband decided to move to Chicago, and she claims she paid for the move by using her psychic abilities to predict horse races. Hughes was working at the same time as Jean Dixon, but did not see as much fame at first, even though, as she states, quote, quote, "Actually, my predictions are much more accurate." Among her many visions was one concerning the assassination of Robert Kennedy, and in 1962 she predicted the exact date of death of former Illinois Governor Adlai Stevenson in 1965. But her real claim to fame was in 1967, when some 6 months in advance she predicted the massive snowstorm that hit Chicago in January of that year. Next up in our number 5 spot is Ursula Shipton. More commonly referred to as Mother Shipton, this 15th century prophet was originally thought to be a witch, predictably so in her time. Born a bastard with no idea of who her father was, she and her mother were shunned to live in a cave outside the village where she had been born. A few years later, a woman took pity on them and offered to take in Shipton as her own if the mother went to a nunnery, and the mother agreed to her conditions. Now with a new family, Mother Shipton still felt to be some kind of devil woman, and once she began to have visions of the future, well, it did not help her case. But believing she had a gift, she continued to share what she saw and slowly gained followers and believers alike. Mother Shipton is known to have foreseen the death of Mary Queen of Scots, claiming, quote, "A widowed queen in England shall be headless seen." But her real claims to fame are the prophecies of the Great Fire of London in 1666 and the Spanish Armada. She died in 1561, but luckily her legacy continues as her prophecies were published 80 years later, providing the world with her visions long after she was gone. Coming in at number 4 is Daniel Douglas Home. Born in the 18th century Scotland from a family of mediums and seers, by the age of just 1, he was sent off to live with his aunt and uncle, who decided to move to America, bringing Home with them. By his teens, he'd already begun to exhibit poltergeist activity such as suspicious knockings or moving furniture, and the aunt was so frightened she threw him out. Now on his own, he decided to host his own seance, and it was received incredibly well, and word spread quickly of his powers. The particularly interesting thing about Home compared to the other mediums was his alleged ability to levitate to great heights during his seances, and that he never held them at his own home. Most believed his gifts to be genuine, though of course some claimed that Home was a fraud, claiming trickery to be the source of his alleged levitating in the sky, but no one was ever able to prove it for sure. In fact, academics and judges of the time were encouraged to visit the home where the seances took place and see for themselves, and nearly all left convinced of his unique gifts. Next up at number 3, Matar Tarabek. Born in 1829 in a small Serbian village, Matar was an illiterate peasant with a gift for seeing into the future. He told his priest of his visions, and the priest, knowing that he would not be able to record them himself, took it upon himself to document every episode the young peasant had. Matar is best known for his prediction of early 20th century Serbia, foreseeing that the king and queen would be assassinated and that the Karađorđevics would come to power, and by 1903 that vision had become a reality. Not only that, but he had visions of beginnings of World War I, including the war between Austro-Hungarian Empire and Serbia, and later the involvement of Germany. He predicted the ending of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and later the Russian involvement and stance in World War II. But most peculiarly, it seems as though he may have foreseen the smartphone. Quote, "Men will build a box, and within it will be some kind of gadget with images, but they will not be able to communicate with me, already dead, even though this image gadget will be as close to the other world as hairs on the human scalp are close to each other. With the help of this image gadget, man will be able to see everything that is happening all over the world." Coming in at number 2 is Edgar Casey. Born in 1877, this psychic claims that his subconscious mind would actually leave his body and travel to the land of the spirits. It was there, in that world, where he would collect the knowledge of the future and bring it back to Earth to pass on to his clients. It was due to this trance-like method that he became known as the Sleeping Prophet. Casey was quite respected in his time and had clients such as Woodrow Wilson, Thomas Edison, Irving Berlin, and George Gershwin. Edward Casey is most famously known for his vision of the stock market crash in 1929, which resulted in the Great Depression, but he's also known for his 1927 prediction prediction that blood would become a diagnostic tool, something that at the time would have seemed like a fantasy. Like many psychics before him, he claims to have foreseen his own demise. During World War II, with many families worried about their loved ones overseas, Casey increased his clients from 2 to 8 a day. This took quite a toll on his health, and as he states, the readings themselves advised him to slow down or he'd die. Predicting his death was fast approaching, he did not slow down, and just 4 days later, Edgar died of a stroke. And last up in our #1 spot is Baba Vanga. Born in 1911, this Bulgarian psychic says that as a young child, a tornado lifted her up in the air where she was spun around and threw into a nearby field. After a long search, she was found with her eyes covered in sand and dust, crying out in pain. Sadly, her family was very poor and only able to pay for a partial operation, which resulted in her gradually losing her sight and becoming completely blind as the years went on. This, however, as she would later claim, would be a turning point in her life. And who knows, maybe the start of her fortune-telling abilities? Vanga had many followers and believers while alive and predicted many famous political and environmental events of the 20th century. In 1969, she had a vision detailing the death of the controversial Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, claiming that she would be killed wearing an orange dress surrounded by smoke and fire. A fate she met in 1984 when Gandhi died as seen by Vanga, shot by her bodyguards while in an orange dress. Vanga is also famous for predicting the breakup of the Soviet Union, Chernobyl, the date of Stalin's death, and that the 44th President of the United States would be an African American, and as we know, it was in fact Barack Obama. Finally, in 1990, she correctly predicted the date of her own death, allegedly pointing to August 11th, 1996 as the day she would shuffle off this mortal coil, which turned out to be completely true.
Starting us off at number 10 is the car crash. Now this story was shared by an anonymous redditor who went to a clairvoyant and got a very accurate reading. Now this woman had been to a lot of different psychics who she claimed were rubbish until this one. The woman told her that she kept hearing voices saying don't sleep and said she saw a dark colored or black car completely totaled on the side of the road. After hearing this, the redditor obviously thought, okay, she's seen me in a car crash, so she tried her best to always stay alert when driving anywhere in the next few months. One day she was moving house with her boyfriend and they were driving back at around 3 AM. They took turns driving and sleeping, but then it hit her that they were tired, they were sleeping, and they were driving a black car. Alarm bells should be going off right about now. She immediately woke up and started paying attention and offered to take the wheel from her boyfriend, who insisted, don't worry babe, I'm fine. A little while later, he full on fell asleep at the wheel and started swerving to the left. She quickly grabbed the wheel and woke him up and ended up driving the rest of the way, but just imagine, if she hadn't gone to that clairvoyant and had that reading, her and her boyfriend would have probably been dead right now. What a thought.
Next up at number 9 is Robert Dixon. Dating back to the 15th century Cheshire, not much is known of this prophet personally, but according to an 18th century leaflet, he's credited as the source for many foreseen events, including Napoleon's exile to St. Helena. Most notably, however, was his prediction of his own death. Due to his rising fame from his visions, he was summoned to the court of King Richard III. Nixon refused, as he stated that he would have starved to death. Well, the king assured him this would not be the case and ordered he be given all the food he wanted and be kept in the kitchen. However, Nixon was caught constantly picking at the food, so the staff started to become really annoyed and locked him in the cupboard when the king was away. However, the guard that locked him away was called on an urgent mission, and Nixon, just as he foreseen, died in the cupboard of starvation.
At number 8 we have the Neckties. Doesn't sound spooky, but just wait for it. A woman had to interview this medium for a story, and after the interview was over, the medium offered to do a reading, to which she skeptically accepted. The medium started telling her about a small red-headed woman who kept saying the word Ethel. The woman's grandma was a small redhead that apparently looked a lot like Ethel Merman, whoever the hell that is. Later on, the medium said a man was with Ethel and he wanted to tell Ruth that he loves her. Now the woman's dad had died prior to the reading, and her mother's middle name was Ruth, and her dad always used to call her Ruthie. Getting spookier now, isn't it? He then went on to say he wants you to tell her that she can get rid of his neckties now. Does that make sense? The woman responded by saying her mother hadn't gotten rid of his clothes yet. She called her mother up after the reading and found out that her mother had actually given all his clothes away but had kept his neckties. Filling our number 7 slot, we have the little boy. This one is also from Susan and her experiences as a psychic. Now, a woman came up to her for an appointment and was worried that her house was haunted because she heard footsteps from the upstairs part of her house. She didn't want to go up there, her kids didn't want to go up there, even her dog didn't want to go up there. Even the dog, guys, no-go zone confirmed. Susan saw a little boy who was left in that room while his family had gone into the light. His entire family had died and gone into the light, but he had not. I didn't even know going to the light was a thing. I thought that was just a made-up concept in The Ghost Whisperer, but good to know. Anyway, Susan advised the woman to give him something. Christmas was coming up, maybe she would benefit from leaving a present in the room for him. The woman put a little angel candle in the room for him and actually spoke to him. After that, the boy was gone from the house, presumably he'd gone into the light. Now at number 6 is The Touch. Now this is a story from Reddit user Calitarius, whose mother died at the beginning of 2011. No, I didn't just randomly throw that fact out there, it becomes relevant in the story later on, I promise. The user's maternal aunt used to visit a clairvoyant every few months who would be able to tell her things she couldn't possibly have known. He once touched his stepfather's old pocket watch and told her aunt that Otto, the stepfather, had passed but was with them on a green chair. This chair was located in her aunt's house where she was spending a lot of time. The clairvoyant went on to predict the user's mother's death without knowing she was suffering through MSA. After touching a book sent by the user's mother to the user's aunt, the man told them the prison she was in was slowly closing in. Her mother died after her heart stopped beating due to an unsafe blood pressure after 5 years of having MSA. So essentially, the clairvoyant saw the aunt's stepdad's dead spirit and predicted the user's mother's death. I'm trusting these clairvoyants and psychics more and more as this list goes on. What about you guys? Coming in at number 5 is the obituary. Do you like the dramatic names I'm coming up for all these things? I think it really sets the tone for what's about to come. A woman came into her appointment with Susan Saxman and she immediately felt this giant wave of nausea hit her as soon as the woman entered the room. She asked the woman how she was feeling, to which she responded that she was feeling terrific. The psychic proceeded to tell her she may need to go to a doctor, to which the woman responded that no, don't worry, she was in great health and there was nothing to worry about. The psychic ran to the toilet and could barely stop herself from throwing up. After that ugly ordeal, she insisted even more that this woman go see a doctor right away and that something was seriously wrong. The woman wouldn't listen to Susan, insisted she was fine, but Susan found the woman's obituary in the newspaper a few months later. I guess the moral of the story is to listen to your psychic more? At number 4 is the New Jersey Medium. Sorry, I truly tried to think of a dramatic name for this story and I couldn't come up with any keyword that stood out enough, so I apologize. But anyway, a man named Al DeLuise went to a medium in New Jersey back in 2001. When he went to meet her, he didn't even say anything other than introduce himself, and the first thing she said was, "Your mother is very happy that you named your daughter after her." Al's mother Rose was dead, but his daughter's middle name was Rose as well. Still, he thought, this is common, a lot of people name their children after their parents, so whatever. She then mentioned a picture he was looking at previously that was his mum's favorite, and there was no way she could have known he was looking at any picture before the meeting. She then said she is also with her daughter. Now, Al never had a sister, but he remembered his mother's first child was a stillborn daughter, and there was absolutely no way she could have known that. But the creepiest part was when she said, "Hold on, there's a young man here trying to get through who's just crossed over. Who's Elizabeth?" At first, Al was confused, and then he realized perhaps she was talking about his friend Liz, whose husband had been killed in the Twin Towers just a month prior. She said, "He wants you to tell Elizabeth that he's okay." I honestly wonder how these people communicate with the dead. Like, is it a thought? Do they see them? Like, what goes on? I really want to know. Filling our number 3 slot is the tape. Now, this story comes from Redditor Flickety Flick, who went into a psychic community called the Lilydale with some friends in his freshman year of university. These people lived together and were meant to be so accurate that other people traveled from far away just to get a reading. Anyway, the user got his reading and went on his way, and 10 years later, he received a tape in the mail with no return address. When he started listening to the tape, he heard a woman giving a psychic reading and then heard a male voice and realized it was his own voice, and it was the reading he had gotten 10 years prior that had somehow been recorded. In the recording, she predicted his life to a T, his career, his wife and kids, even their names, what car he would drive, a Pontiac Grand Prix by the way, and at the end of the tape the woman left her name, phone number and address and said to contact her if I'm not dead yet. He gave the number a call to find a man saying, sorry, my wife passed away last weekend. And also the man was living in a dorm at the time he went to see her, so how did the woman even find his current address? I have so many questions. Now at number 2 is the divorce. Now this one is another story from Susan Saxman, our reluctant but seemingly very accurate psychic. A man going through a divorce came to see her and she told him that she didn't see him getting divorced. She didn't even see him being apart from his wife or even ending up in court. But she did see him having sole custody of their daughter in a few years, to which the man asked, how can that be if I'm not even getting divorced? The man's wife came to visit her a week later to tell Susan that her husband went on a business trip on a small airplane which crashed and in which he sadly passed away, which is probably why she never saw them getting divorced or going to court. 7 years later, the woman came back to tell her that their daughter had just died of leukemia and that the man did have sole custody of her daughter in heaven after all. That's a bit morbid. And finally, at number 1 is the murder. Now this story was shared by UberGeek64 on Reddit, and there's not much to their story other than their post, so there's no real way of confirming or denying it, but I thought it deserved to be included. Now the user and their parents used to live in Greece, and their parents decided to go to a gypsy fortune teller just for fun, but it didn't end as fun. The woman told them that the dad would become a widower, to which the mother laughed and brushed it off. 6 years later, the mother was murdered in Canada. The user was a complete skeptic before the incident, as was their dad, but now their dad is terrified of these readings. You guys' thoughts? Do you think this happened, or is it just a clickbait comment? Let me know. I tried googling things about it, I couldn't find anything. What do you guys think?
At number 10 we have Don't Drive. This prediction came way of famous New York psychic Susan Saxman. She had a young man come in to get a reading one day, and she kept getting the same vision. This man was behind the wheel of a car, dying in a brutal car accident. She told this boy over and over again he should never drive, even suggested that he should forego getting his license. This young man was pretty freaked out by the reading, and it wasn't even 2 months later before Susan received a call from the boy's mom. He had just died in an accident just off the highway. Him and his friend were both killed. But get this, the kid who got the reading, he wasn't the one who was driving. Maybe if he had been driving, he wouldn't have died. Maybe it was the knowledge of his own future that sealed his fate. Who knows, or maybe he would have died anyways, I don't know.
Coming in at number 9 is Howard. This story was part of Susan Saxman's book The Reluctant Psychic, and it hints at the very real possibility that spirits are very much in our world. Susan was preparing for a reading appointment when a panicky woman showed up unexpected without an appointment, asking a hurried question, I just want to know if I should take this job or not. Surely you can do that without me sitting down. Susan then said, do you know a Howard? To which the woman replied she did not, but sadly all Susan could see was Howard and the fact that he was right beside the woman, and he was very not impressed. The woman was lost, claiming, no, I don't know anyone called Howard, and Susan then said, I'm sorry, maybe you should come in when you're less rushed, because all she was getting was Howard. How many times have I said Howard in this point? Just let me know. Then in his scheduled appointment, Howard was still there. Susan asked the woman if she maybe knew a Howard wearing a button-down sweater, and the woman said, that's my dad, we buried him in that sweater. So Father of the Year Howard over here knew Susan's schedule and was not happy at all at the fact that this other woman was trying to take his daughter's appointment. I mean, dead or alive, once a dad, always a dad. Gotta love dads, eh?
At number 8 we have Neckties. This was an anonymous statement given by a journalist at the Huffington Post. He was once scheduled to interview a medium. The journalist had never really believed in that sort of thing, but after the interview they went out for lunch and the medium offered him a free reading. Skeptical and willing to check the legitimacy of this medium, he agreed. The medium told him that there was an older woman. She was short, portly, and had thick red hair. She kept calling herself Ethel. His grandma passed away recently, and everyone called her Ethel because she looked like the actress Ethel Merman. She followed up by telling him that there was an older man with Ethel. The older man had a message for the journalist. He said, tell Ruthie I love her and that she can get rid of the neckties. The journalist's dad had recently passed away, and Ruthie was the nickname his dad used for his mom, and as far as he knew, his dad was the only one who called his mom by that name. He was pretty freaked out by this, and after the medium left, he called his mom to relay the message. message. He told his mom that his dad said that he loved her. She started crying over the phone, then he asked about the neckties in the closet. His mom said that she had recently given away all of her late husband's belongings to Goodwill except for the neckties. Whether you believe in mediums or not, this guy's batting 1,000 for sure. At number 7 we have You Should Have Remembered. A young woman went to go see a psychic, and the psychic had a very clear, precise message for her. Stay away from the man with the long dark hair. I mean, this is kind of vague. There's loads of dudes walking around with long dark hair every day. I mean, with a straightener and some dollar store dye, I could become one of those guys. So it kind of makes sense why this girl forgot about this information. You can't just go walking through the world being afraid of men with long dark ponytails. How are you ever gonna go into a reptile shop again? Well, years later this young woman met a man, and the two of them seemed to really hit it off. They started dating, but after being in the relationship for a few months he became extremely abusive, and of course this man had long dark hair. It wasn't until after she was able to get away from him that she remembered the warning that the psychic gave to her. You should really write that kind of important information down. It probably will come in handy. At number 6 we have The End. BuzzFeed member Bellac wrote about a reading her mother got from a psychic. It was some pretty straightforward stuff about who she was and who her family was and all the pretty basic psychic things. It didn't really leave her feeling too surprised. But then the psychic told her that her marriage would not end in divorce. But it was the way that he told it to her that was very strange. As if he knew something more but didn't want to give up the information. Her mom made sure to write down everything the psychic told her just to test to see if this information would actually come into reality. A few years later her husband passed away, and she thought back on what the psychic had told her. It felt like he knew something was coming but didn't have the heart to tell her. At number 5 we have Both Are Gone. Let's dip back into Susan Saxman's files for just a moment. One day a man came to see Susan, and he was going through a rather stressful divorce. Susan gave the man a reading, and she told him that he wasn't going to get divorced, that him and his wife were never going to file the papers, and that 7 years from now he was going to have sole custody of his kid. The man was shocked, and weeks later Susan was visited by the man's wife. The lady was distraught and clearly very upset. The man who visited her previously had just died in a plane crash. I don't think that's exactly how he thought things were going to play out, but in the end they didn't get divorced, so she was right. That seemed to be the end of the story, but then 7 years later the man's wife came back to see her again. Once again she was very upset. She told Susan that she was right about everything. Her husband did have sole custody of her daughter because her daughter had just died of leukemia. At least she can have a little bit of solace knowing that her daughter and husband are together in the afterlife. At number 4 we have Stay Away from the White Building. A young woman went to go see a psychic. The reading was pretty casual, there was nothing notable happening. Then all of a sudden the psychic started trembling, nearly crying. She started telling the woman, "Don't let Dorothy go near the white building." The woman was pretty freaked out by this, but she didn't know anyone named Dorothy. Almost 15 years later, the woman's friend was murdered next to a white apartment building. Her name was Dorothy. It took so long for her to meet her new friend that she had forgotten all about the prediction that she had heard so many years ago. At number 3 we have Youre Sick. Alright, this is the last Susan Saxman's one on the list, I promise. But she has some pretty awesome ones, and that's why I'm using her so many times today. Susan wrote about one woman who came to see her, and as soon as she walked into the room, Susan felt sick to her stomach. It's not abnormal for her to feel other people's pain, but this was an extreme case. She felt so ill she had to leave the room and vomit. Susan pleaded with the woman that she needed to see a professional, that she was very sick and needed to see someone immediately. The woman insisted that she was fine, and it wasn't long before Susan was reading the woman's obituary in the newspaper. At number 2 we have the atomic bomb. The heavenly dart with Stretch's coarse death in the speaking. A great achievement the proud nation brought low by the stone in the tree rumors of a monstrous human. Bring purge, then explanation. These were the words written by Nostradamus. Maybe the most famous psychic who has ever walked the face of the earth. And it said that these writings were the prediction of the atomic bomb. I don't really think you can get a more cursed prediction than that of nuclear weapons. Could you imagine what it would have been like for a dude from the 1500s to see a massive explosion crushing an entire city and then being like, okay, well at least I'm going to be dead before that happens. Oof, it's a lot to weigh in your soul. And for the number 1 spot we have the rise of Adolf Hitler. We got one more Nostradamus one for you. Of course I had to put a couple on here, he's like the most famous dude. Nostradamus used to write a bunch of poems back in the 1500s, and everyone thought that he was just a huge nerd. Turns out his poems have been predicting the future, and he was also a huge nerd. Probably one of the most frightening predictions he made was the rise of Adolf Hitler. Now a lot of psychics and fortune tellers talk about the Antichrist or the emergence of some great evil, but this one seems strangely accurate. What he said was, from the depths of the west of Europe, a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce great troops, his fame will increase towards the realm of East, and beast ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. The great part of the battlefield will be against Hister. Into the cage of iron will the great one be drawn, when the child of Germany is observing nothing. After reading that, you think this guy might have been onto something. Too bad psychics just give us problems and never any solutions. Like Nostradamus, you should have seen all this horrible future, found Hitler's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, then kicked him in the nuts and make sure that he would never have kids, therefore stopping Hitler's bloodline. These psychics are always talkers, none of them are doers. Alright everyone, that is our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As promised, I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts. Remember, if you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. I pick new pets every day, so if you don't get picked one day, message back another day. If it takes me a while to get back to you, I am very sorry. I literally have hundreds of these to do. And without taking any longer, let's shout out some pets. First, we have this little guy Ace. This guy is a champ and I just love him. Then we have the rat Blue. I think that's the cutest picture of a rat I've ever seen. Then Nick sent in a collage of his pets. Look at all these little good boys hanging out. I love it. Harley sent in a picture of Max. There's no face in this picture. The dog's not facing the camera, but you sent it in, so I put it in anyways. But I bet he's super cute. I bet he's cute. Then Nate sent in a picture of his cat. Look at those beautiful green eyes. Very cute. Love this one. And finally, Dan sent in a picture of Buddy and Jax. Two little bird buddies, so cute.